Good morning, everybody. Jumping on a little bit late today. So if you're used to watching live, one of those faithful people that watches me consistently live, I apologize that I've kept you waiting. A couple sort of disclaimers here. Allergy season where I'm living has been really bad this year for some of us. I know it's been tearing through my family like something else. So I got a bit of a cough, a bit stuffy this morning. Part of the reason that I'm running late. So you'll have to forgive me if I have some problems with that. I'm going to check a couple things real fast while I give it time to breathe and see if anybody else jumps on this morning. Hope everybody's doing well out there, enjoying their lives, enjoying what's left of summer. Gosh, this is so weird. Sometimes I just take technology, trying to get this shared in a few places. So my topic today, if you notice in the title, I'm going to talk again about receiving divine guidance. And if you're one of my atheist friends, you can still benefit from this. So you can stick around, and I think you'll be able to find some benefit out of what I'm going to talk about today. So let's just begin with what is divine guidance. Guidance from God, or guidance in our lives from basically, I'm presupposing, yes, the existence of a God, the presence of the Spirit in our lives, the divine spark within us. You've heard me talk about that. But I'm also presupposing that there must be some kind of order, some kind of plan, something bigger and greater than ourselves, some kind of pattern. I really struggle with this idea that everything is just random and there is no terminus, there is no direction, there is no point to anything in our lives. I see a bunch of people jumping on. Give a shout out to a few of you: Marietta, Marie, Shannon, Penny, Lulu. Thank you all for jumping on, being patient with me. Les, sorry to keep you guys waiting today if you were waiting around. But I really struggle with this idea that there's just, this is just, I don't know. I mean, I just struggle with the idea that we just randomly showed up because the universe is infinite. And so eventually there's going to be combinations of matter organizing itself. And here we are. And somehow this matter organized into a human being and into a brain, and brain produces consciousness and our conscious experience. And yet out of that conscious experience, there is a desire for survival, but not just a desire for survival, meaning that all our physical needs are met and that we're able to continue breathing and going through life, because that's kind of a drag too. But also that we have, most of us, if not all of us, have a quest for meaning. We need meaning in our lives. We want to do meaningful things. We need to have and find meaning in our lives. And I know there are a lot of people out there who believe that we're just a cosmic accident of epic proportions. And yeah, I'm being a little bit facetious, but my atheist friends are very facetious when they push back on those of us that aren't atheists. So just take a chill pill if you're out there and getting upset with this, saying, this isn't what we believe. You create straw man arguments a lot against people who believe in God. So let's just all be friends and take it in stride. For me, it just doesn't work. For me, it's depressing. It's dystopic. I absolutely hate it. Fortunately for me, I've had enough experiences in my life and enough events that have occurred in my life that I'm absolutely and totally convinced that there is an order, there is an implicit order, there is a plan, there is meaning, there is life after this life. I'm totally convinced of that. And so, on the flip side of that, why do bad things happen to good people? Why isn't hunger and starvation and cancer and children's hospitals? That's the best argument to me. That's the best argument that for atheism. That's the best argument for or against this idea that there is some divine plan, someone watching over us, someone who cares or in a meaningful way is involved in our lives in terms of a deity or some kind of invisible entities. And I get that. It's a great argument. But I can't make my decisions and live my life based upon the suffering that's in the world. None of us can as individuals make our decisions based on that, or we'd either be out there killing ourselves to try to stop it, and it would just be a drop in the bucket. Not saying we shouldn't do stuff to try to alleviate suffering. I believe in trying to alleviate suffering 100%. But hopefully I'm rambling on too much about this. So let's get into the meat of this. What I want to talk about is I just want you to begin to think about how do I make our decisions about our lives? How do we make our decisions about our lives? Now, for most of us, life, it just kind of happens. As human beings, we are creatures of habit. We get into, again, patterns. We get into habits. We kind of wake up and think the same things, think the way that we thought yesterday, do the same thing depending on the day of the week that we did the week before. If we make changes in our lives, lots of times for people, let's say big changes, like you move from one city to another city, you're going to choose another city based on some personal preferences or patterns that are in your life. Oftentimes, leave a relationship. You're going to leave a relationship where your patterns, the way that you relate to the person creates certain outcomes for you. You find a new relationship, and after a while, those same patterns, those same habits are going to start to create the same kind of outcomes with the new person in your life. Leave your job because you hate your boss, go to a new place. Maybe you're going to end up hating your boss there too. Maybe or maybe not. I'm just saying that even with our big decisions, oftentimes we're making them out of the same habitual thought patterns, set of emotions, set of preferences. And for a lot of us, those opportunities for big changes in our lives come along very, very infrequently. So at the end of the day, what ends up guiding life for a lot of people is just their patterns. It's almost like as human beings, unless we awaken, unless we realize it, we just sort of become automatic response machines. We end up responding to same situations, the same people, dealing with the same stuff, just kind of like Bill Murray's Groundhog Day, just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Let me know your thoughts in the chat if you think that makes sense. Now, if we need to be guided into something, or we need to make a decision, we need to solve a problem in our lives, we need to know how to fix a situation. Could be anything. What do we use? How do we approach it? What are our problem-solving skills? Because oftentimes when we're looking for guidance, it's because we're looking for solutions. So what do we use? For a lot of people, myself included, more often than I want to admit it, and this is going to sound funny, but let me finish. By the time I finish, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. For a lot of people, trying to logically reason a way out of a situation or logically reason yourself into a situation using reason, using logic, using rationale, getting advice from people maybe that have been there before, maybe a little bit smarter than you about various different situations, all these sorts of things. But I'm definitely a thinker. And so I will definitely go with logic and reason oftentimes to try to solve a problem. Other people may be more feeling oriented. Maybe you're more of a feeler. In other words, I don't feel good about this situation. This doesn't feel right as a way to approach this problem, to be solution oriented. I did this because it just felt right. So maybe you're led a little bit more by your feelings. But for most of us, it's going to be one of the two. It's going to be either being led by reason and logic, or it's going to be led by feeling and emotion. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those. I just want to open your minds to the possibility that there are other modes of knowing that used to be highly honored in cultures and societies by humanity that are more intuitive. Now, can your reasoning faculties, can your feelings, how you feel about a situation, can that be intuitive? Absolutely, because intuition, if you think about the word tuition, where do you pay tuition? You pay tuition to a school to learn something, to be guided into a discipline, right? And then obviously the word in means that it comes from within. So it's teaching, if you will, leadership guidance that comes from within rather than from without. So obviously reason, logic, and feeling and emotion, what's going on in your bodies, can be forms of intuition. So I want to start with what I just said. What's going on in your body? I think this is super, super important. I think that the body has a wisdom that goes beyond just overthinking. If you're like me and you're a thinker, especially if you're an obsessive thinker, you get stuck in your head when you start trying to solve situations, when you're making decisions about where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and probably don't listen enough to the wisdom of the body. How many of us listen to our gut checks? How many of us listen to our notice subtle shifts and changes in our heart rate or in our breathing? Notice when we tense up in the middle or when we're protecting ourselves. We can do this, with people. There's certain people that we feel comfortable with. And so if you'll notice, for most people, when you're comfortable with a person, you're going to be more open in your posture. In other words, you're going to be sitting, maybe have your shoulders back a little bit more, but you're not going to be protecting this area of your body. Now, there are other people that when they walk in the room, we just sort of tense up. And so maybe we do this, but we have some kind of, usually using our arms or some other barrier. We create a sort of a protective barrier. We do this unconsciously. We're not aware that we're doing it. Other people do it with us. And just because you're sitting across talking to somebody that has their arms crossed, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't feel comfortable with you, but it certainly can be an indication that they're feeling threatened in some way, shape, or form, even if they themselves are not aware of it. So our bodies really are where the deeper layers of our subconscious speak to people. That's why there's so much today about, body language. People used to say it's a myth that I'm determined to try to bust, but I don't know why, because even experts that probably should know better keep repeating it. Something that just got out to the culture that I can't remember what it is exactly because it's not an accurate statement. Again, it's a myth. But people try to say, 93% of all communication happens at a nonverbal level. It's usually some outrageous amount that they say. 75% of all communication happens at a nonverbal level. And I always tell people this is a real easy myth to bust. Just turn on any news program, turn on any podcast like this one, and just turn on the mute button and watch the person, watch a sitcom, watch the people interact with their body language, facial expressions, etc. And then I want you to tell me 90% of what happened or 75% of what they were talking about. You can't. The language part, the listening part is super important. However, that doesn't mean that our body language is not communicating and sending messages. Now, what I do believe is true is that when words don't match actions, we know this, right? When words don't match actions, actions are telling us the truth. Now, that action, I'm not saying someone's lying. So if they say they're going to do something and then they don't do it, or they do something else, or they tell you they were doing something, you find out they were doing something else, clearly then their actions, speak louder than their words. But again, just paying attention to body language. If someone's, turtling like this, got their tension up in their shoulders and somewhat like this, then they're dealing with some shit in their lives, or they're not liking what's happening in the conversation. Even if they say, "Oh, I'm doing great. I'm doing okay," or "No, I really agree with you." Someone says, notice I said, "No, I really agree with you." My no came first. You get the point that our bodies are what's telling the truth. And so we can use our bodies and how we're feeling in our bodies to help us make decisions, to help us understand, to find some of that guidance. So paying attention to what's going on in your body. What are you feeling? If you tell somebody calls up and invites you to a party, and you tell them that you're going to go to the party, but in your body, you just don't want to. In your body, you feel tense. You feel pit in your stomach. You feel a check, whatever. And you go anyway, you're sort of betraying yourself. Your body's trying to send you some messages that are really important. And so being a soul that is embodied is super duper important. And I wanted to touch on that first before we get into these other areas of what I'm calling divine guidance or the intuitive ways of knowing, if you don't believe in a God. So being able to be grounded and present in your body is super important. Being able to listen to the messages that are coming from your body, super important. Doesn't mean it's always right any more than your logical reason about a situation or a problem or solution is always going to be right either. But it's really important to be congruent in a situation if you want to have peace and if you want to be happy. So if you're not congruent, in other words, my mind's telling me this, my heart's telling me something else, my body's telling me something else, I'm still not totally certain about what I want to do. I want to jump out and do this thing. It makes sense for me to jump out and do this thing. It makes sense for me to go to this party, hang out with these group of people, change this job, get out of this relationship or whatever. But in my body, it just doesn't feel right, or I don't feel settled. I don't feel fully persuaded within. Then I would say pause, listen to that, find out, do some work and find out why you don't feel congruent about it. And that begins with listening to our bodies. Now, this can be hard for people who have had a lot of trauma in their lives, particularly if you had a lot of complex trauma, because you go around in a almost consistently, what we would call in the clinical world, dissociated state, where you're not present in your body, you're not grounded in your body. So you may have to do some work on trauma and stuff like that with a good therapist or a good, friend. There's lots of resources and books and information out there that can really help you in resolving that. But being able to be grounded and present in your body. Now let's get into other ways of intuitive knowing, because again, my conceptualization of God, of the plan, of the purpose, of the meaning is not governed by Judeo-Christian limitations, by Abrahamic limitations. In other words, I'm not talking about God in the traditional sense that a lot of us think about God as the old man in the sky, sort of, or the great monarch in the sky that we have to try to persuade to get anything good to happen. I have more of a idea of God as having emanated out of consciousness, out of mind, out of logos, and incarnate in all things. For my friends that get in the weeds with that stuff, it's not even really panentheism. That word doesn't mean anything to you. Don't worry about it. You don't need to know what it means. I'm just speaking to a group of people that perhaps is more theologically minded and wants to get deeper on that topic. It's more the idea of emanation rather than creation. So what that means then is that as sentient beings, as conscious beings, we are divine. We are an emanation of the divine. Christ in us, for my Christian friends, is the hope of glory. And so at the end of the day, and this is why this could even be relevant to you if you're a complete atheist and you're still watching, at the end of the day, divine guidance is guidance that's coming from that divine spark that is within, which is why when I'm talking about divine guidance, I'm talking about intuition, or I'm talking about learning or being led from within, not from without. So see, here's the problem with religion. Religion, for the most part, causes us to conform to something from the outside in. Religion gives us a precept, a teaching, a belief, a morality, whatever the case may be, and says, this is the benchmark, this is the standard, this is the measure, this is the form or the pattern that you have to fit yourself into. And they give you a bunch of those. So they give you a bunch of precepts, they give you a bunch of beliefs, they give you a bunch of principles, morals, whatever. And they say, this is what God wants everyone to be like. God wants everyone to be carbon copies of each other, that there's only one right way to live life. There's only one right way to know. There's only one right path for, in other words, we see this really, really strongly in family values. There's only one right kind of family. That's the nuclear family with a husband and a wife and children. And that's the ideal. And that is God's plan, because that's how God did it in the garden. That's the biblical model of family. That's the biggest bunch of BS lies that has ever been sold to anybody at any time by religion, because the biblical model of family is polygamy, because they were a polygamous society. They were a agricultural society, and they were reflecting what worked in the culture of the day financially for the family, for the heirs, all that kind of stuff. Most marriage throughout the centuries and history of humanity has been about the passing on of property or wealth. This, by the way, is why priests in the Catholic Church to this day are still not allowed to get married. It really has and had nothing to do with devotion to the church and marrying the church. I'm sorry, my Catholic friends. I'm sorry if you're a priest that's watching this. I truly, deeply, I'm saying this from my heart. If you're a priest and you're watching this, I honor your commitment to the church. And I believe if you made a vow of celibacy to the church and for the church, that vow is sincere, and that is just an amazing demonstration of commitment to your life's work and to God and to your calling and all that stuff. I genuinely believe that. However, that's not why the Catholic Church or institution instituted that principle. They instituted it because they didn't want to have to deal with families and heirs from a financial perspective of their priests and their bishops, etc., and so on. So it's only been in the last 150 years, for the most part, that marriage and family has been idealized as something so romantic as finding your life's partner, spending the rest of your life together, etc., and so on. Prior to that, it was, how do we replenish the earth in the best way, and how do we steward finances from one generation to the next? So what am I saying? I'm giving you an example. Christians going out saying, the Bible says this one pattern is for everyone for all time. And if you're tuning in late, what I'm using for an example is the nuclear family, the father, the mother, the children. This is God's plan. This is God's ideal. This is the biblical idea of marriage, is poppycock. They were an agricultural people that most of them had many wives and many children from many wives. In fact, if you want, it's kind of a fun message to do, really mess with people. But the 12 tribes of Israel, the way that the patriarchs, the sons of Jacob, came about to become the heads, if you will, of the 12 tribes of Israel, very scandalous, very, very scandalous. There's a drug deal in there. There's trading drugs for sex, and multiple women involved, and yet God was blessed in the whole thing. So what am I saying? What are you saying, Aaron? I'm trying to give you a very, very strong example of how religion is external, how it's exoteric, it's outside of us. And it says, this is one way, this one belief, this one pattern, this one way of doing things, this one way of living is the right way. We're going to tell you what it is, and then we're going to tell you what you have to fit into. And then we sort of cut out pieces and parts of ourselves and try to squeeze ourselves into that belief. We try to squeeze ourselves into that pattern. And so, and then people call that, divine guidance. They call that God telling you what to do. You can find it out from the scriptures. You can find it out from the word of God. You can find it out from a prophet who gives you a prophetic message and tells you what it is that you're supposed to do. It's all outside of us, not within us. So when I'm talking about divine guidance, I'm talking about the exact opposite of religion. I'm talking about the exact opposite of responding to a divine force that is ontologically, the nature of it is outside of us. I'm talking about that we have the divine nature within us. We partake and participate in the divine nature. And so the authentic self-speaking, the deepest self-speaking, that then is divine guidance. So how do we unlock some of this stuff? And I already talked about some of it. But other intuitive ways of knowing can be dreams. Now, dreams are really tricky because it's going to take you a while to develop the ability to, for some people, to even remember that you had a dream. For others to keep track of those dreams. And for yet others, the next level is learning the dream language, learning how symbols, emotions, patterns, progressions of the dream have various different meanings for you. Now, I want to be really clear that your dreams, in terms of a guidance system, is for you, but it can be super tricky, be super misunderstood, because in this culture, although I'm going to say this, because dreams come in the language of symbols, and we don't speak that language in this culture anymore. We have that language spoken to us. Advertisers, politicians, corporations use symbols in a very powerful way to impact our subconscious, guide our decisions, and to really try to manipulate and control us. Religion does the same thing. But for the most part, religion has kicked symbolism out of the church. Most churches today, unless you go to a traditional Catholic church, Episcopalian, maybe Lutheran, maybe on some level Presbyterian or Methodist, there's not a lot of symbolism that's used anymore. Everybody else, you're going to a rock concert with an inspirational speaker. That's what you're doing. You're just going to a cheaper version of a Tony Robbins seminar every Sunday. But anyway, I'm digressing. So that one's kind of tricky, but it can be still something that speaks to you, especially when you have a dream that you cannot shake, or you have a dream that keeps repeating itself, or you have a theme that keeps repeating itself in your dreams. So 2 examples of this for me: when I was much younger, when I was in my 20s, that's when I was really being discipled. That's when I was really sacrificing my authentic self on the altar for the fantasy of the false self that religion was giving to me. And I kept having these dreams of situations where I was out of control. So in one dream, I remember I'm hanging onto a pier for some reason, like, that goes out into the ocean, and the waves are causing the pier to, sway, and I'm hanging on for dear life, and I feel completely out of control. Another dream, I'm sitting in the back seat and someone else is driving the car, and they're driving it in a direction that is away from the destination that I want to get to. And I'm so frustrated that I can't take control of the car and move it in another direction. So you kind of get the point. In another dream, I am trying to make it to class. I'm back in high school, trying to make it to class. I can't remember my schedule. I can't find the office. I can't find the classrooms. So again, that theme of I have no control to get to where I need to be or to where I want to be. And I didn't understand those dreams at the time, but those dreams were all intuitions trying to warn me, get out of this situation. You're not in control of your life. You're letting other people control your life. You're letting other people dictate to you the rights and the wrongs, and you're not even listening to anything within yourself. So I would repeatedly have that theme coming up in a dream. So if I would have sat and listened to that, I would have been in a much better place. Now, give you a positive example of that. It's very similar in the sense that I was still listening to my elders and apostles and everybody that was outside of myself. But I kept dreaming that I went back to college. And over and over and over again. Well, no, actually, I take that back. I wanted to go back to college. Let me preface this. I wanted to go back to college. I talked to my overseers about it because I just believed that's what you were supposed to do. A wise man seeks counsel, I believed. And even though they had no business, it really wasn't any of their business. What they should have told me, if they had any kind of integrity, any kind of sense, any kind of decency or humanity, which they don't and they didn't, and they're a horrible organization with horrible people. Just gonna lay that out up front. They're what's wrong with our country today. But at any rate, I'll get off of that. I went to them. Now, what they should have said was, that's really none of our business. If you want to go back to college, that's really up to you. That's a decision for you and your wife to make. And we support you. That would have been the right answer. But instead, that might expose me to new ideas. That might get me out of the think tank. That might get me out from under their spell. And they know this. They know this. So the liars that they are, the hypocrites that they are, you can tell I still have some hurt that I'm working through. I'm saying it with a smile. But they said, no, that's not God's will for your life. God's will is for you to devote yourself to ministry. You shouldn't be going back and getting these other, looking at these other things, because I wanted to study psychology. Oh my God, that's the worst thing in the world that I could possibly study. And so I listened to that because I believed in listening to the counsel that was around me. And so for almost an entire year, I dreamt at least once a week that I was back in college and that I was learning, that I was working towards my college degree, that I was graduating from college. So by this time, I knew to listen to that theme. So then Restream's telling me I lost connection. I hope I didn't. If you're still out there, let me know. So these organizations, they teach you that if you don't obey the pastor, the elders, the group around you, that somehow you're in rebellion, somehow you have an Ahab spirit or something or other, Jezebel spirit, something like that. So anyway, I had to have, okay, so I did lose connection, but Shannon's telling me that it's back. I don't know where I disconnected, but I was talking about not going to college because of these groups and these people telling me, my overseers telling me that I shouldn't. And I wanted to have an obedient spirit. I didn't want to be an Ahab or a Jezebel or anything like that. And so I dreamt for at least once a week about being in college, going back to college, getting my college degree. And this time I listened to that internal guidance. And that internal guidance has served me very, 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 very well. And I'm very grateful and thankful that I did go back to school. So that's how dreams can kind of play into this. Then visions can also be part of this. A vision can speak a little less symbolically. It still speaks symbolically, but it can also speak very literally. Dreams, in my experience, are almost never literal. They may have some literal components to it. So, for example, me going back to school, me sitting in a college class, that's obviously a literal aspect of it. So it's not that it doesn't ever happen, but for the most part, a lot of it's going to be symbolic. And I'm saying that because people who have nightmares, people have called me over the years or sought counsel from me over the years on dreams. Someone dies or there's a death in the dream or they die. Almost every time something like that happens, it's symbolic, not literal. So it's another reason I'm emphasizing that, because I don't want people to be scared if they have a bad dream, because more often than not, that stuff isn't going to happen the way that you dreamed it. You can find a pattern and symbol behind it down the road for sure, but not the literal. Now, visions may be a little bit more literal. So what's a vision? So I have received a lot of intuition and communication through visions, through relaxing, being in meditation, and a reel just pops up in my head. By reel, I mean REEL. A movie just starts playing in my head that gets my attention and will speak to me and will have significance for me. That's how I deconstructed, literally, quite literally. How I deconstructed and got to where I am was through a visionary experience. Not everybody's going to have that, and not every vision is going to be guidance. Those are areas really where, just like with dreams, it takes time to sort that out and understand when that's part of your internal guidance system and when it's not. I just want to throw it out there. Synchronicities is another good example of this. So I'll give you a perfect example of synchronicities in terms of guidance. When I was going for my master's degree, I had not yet finished my bachelor's degree. I had a degree in theology, but it wasn't from a regionally accredited university. And so they wouldn't accept any of those credits. And that degree would not open the door for me for my master's degree. So I still have a year left on my bachelor's degree. A friend of mine who was in the same program that I had gotten into, the same program that I was in, was in the hospital. I went and visited him in the hospital, and his wife told me that there was a master's program in counseling that was opening up There was an extension of a university a couple hours away from us, but they would be meeting one weekend a month at a location that was literally less than 10 minutes from my house. So it was very close. And it was affordable. It's going to be 3 years long. My buddy was going to be in it, so I wouldn't be doing it by myself. But it started in 2 days. Problem is, I still had a year to go on my bachelor's degree. So I called the people up at the university that offered the master's degree, asked if I can enroll. They said, absolutely. I said, well, there's one problem. I said, I'm not finished with my bachelor's degree yet. And they said, oh, that's a killer. Just forget about it. And they said, well, how much credits do you have left to pick up? And I didn't want to tell them. I needed like years worth of credits still, like 60 credits or something, or 30 credits. I needed 30 credits. And I said, just a few. I was being purposely vague. And they said, well, the first semester is, we just kind of let everybody in and then we weed them out. You aren't really accepted in the program until the second semester. So as long as you have your degree done by December, you'll be good. Now, I knew there was no possible way that I could have my degree done by December, but this just felt right. I'm following my feelings. I'm following my internal guidance. It just felt right. So I said, okay, good. I'll be done. I'll be done with it. I hung up the phone. 2 days later, I'm sitting in class thinking, what the hell am I going to do to come December, And I just figured that everything will figure itself out. So what am I talking about? Talking about synchronicities. So synchronicities, what happens? My advisor leaves the university. My advisor in the bachelor's program that I was doing leaves the university, and I get a new advisor. Now I'm paying really close attention to what's happening in terms of synchronicities. Buddy just happens to go to the hospital. I just happened to find out about this program 2 days before. I call up and they say I can get in. The next week, my advisor steps down. So when I had originally enrolled in the program, I had asked my advisor about my Bible school credits, if they could be accepted towards my degree. And I was just told flat out no. I decide to ask again because I have a new advisor. So I asked this advisor the same question, and she says, well, we cannot receive them as academic credits. However, we do have professional credits and professional training that we can accept if you apply for it as professional credit, not academic credit, and it might cover some of your electives. Now, fortunately, with the way the program was structured, I had taken all of my major courses in psychology. I had all the psychology courses done. I had all the general credits done. What was left for me was the elective credits. So, long story short, within a week or two, I get that information to the college, ask for professional credit, and they give me the full 30 credits and graduate me, or I finish the program in October. So what am I saying? I didn't have a vision that said, Aaron, go apply to this university. They have a program out there for thou. I didn't have any sense that that was coming, but the stars were aligning, if you will. The circumstances were aligning in my life in synchronicities, and I was able to recognize the synchronicities. And because of those synchronicities, I was able to be guided into a path that has served me well and brought me a lot of satisfaction in my life. And I think allowed me to serve people in a capacity that I probably couldn't have. And I probably never would have deconstructed if I hadn't gone back to school and gotten an education and learned about critical thinking and learned about psychology and learned about some of the really toxic stuff that I was involved in. I never would have gotten out of a toxic situation if I hadn't had a vision that awakened me to the reality of what was going on in my life. So a lot of really positive, healthy, good things that have proven out later on down the road have come from these principles that I'm sharing with you about listening to divine guidance. So hopefully that is helpful for you. I know it can be frustrating. I've gotten this feedback from a few of you that it can be frustrating when I talk about some of this stuff, that I really emphasize the what and not as much the how. If you go back and listen to this, there's definitely some how in there. But even with the how, when I said like dreams, it takes a while to learn that language. Well, how do I learn that language? With visions, it takes a while to be able to discern. Also, with following that inward voice, it takes a while to discern what is the voice of the authentic core self, the divine self, and what is the voice of enculturation and patterning, because most of us have a lot of stuff going on in our heads. So how do I differentiate that stuff? And I just want to say those things are courses in and of themselves. And from my experience, teaching people the how is very difficult to do when you're not in person with that person, observing them, allowing them to really ask questions, have experiences, ask questions, get feedback, et cetera, and so on. So my original intention with the New Day Global Group was to be able to create a lot more content than what I've been able to create, just because of the time factors in my life. And I know you guys understand that, and I appreciate that. But I was having this dialogue interaction with someone recently, and one of the ideas that came up was like maybe a Zoom call or something like that. So if you are interested in something like that, I might be putting that out to the New Day Global group. So if you haven't joined the New Day Global Facebook group, it's a private Facebook group, great group of people. We're almost up to 300 members. You can find us at New Day Global in the Facebook arena, and you can join that group, ask to join that group, and we'll be glad to, as long as you agree to the rules and everything, we'll be glad to bring you on board, and we'd love to have you as part of the community. Other things you can do to help just free up my time is through financial support. So I have a link to this where you can go to our PayPal page. It's all PayPal me /New Day Global, and you can make a contribution there. You can set up monthly donations, make a one-time donation, however you want to do that. That really, really helps us. Or if you're on YouTube, or if you're watching this on Facebook, you can go out to the YouTube channel, which is Conscious Spirituality. You can hit like, subscribe, you can share the video. That's going to help us grow the channel, so that eventually there can be some financial support that comes to us through that as well. Of course, only want you to give as whatever's in your heart to give, and if you can afford it. So anyway, thank you for listening. Hope this was helpful. Again, sorry I jumped on late. For those of you that watch live, I appreciate you being patient with me, and I will see you again.